I thought we were unbreakable. Every time I repeat that in my head, it tastes bitter, like metal left in your mouth too long. And yet, here I am, standing in the corner of this old bookstore, trying not to make it obvious that I've been watching her for the past 15 minutes. She's behind the counter, sorting through a stack of returned novels with that effortless grace that makes it seem like she's floating instead of standing. I know I'm not supposed to notice the little things, how her fingers brush the edges of a worn paperback, or the way her sleeve slides down just a fraction too far on her arm, but I do. I notice everything. Her name is Claire. She's in her mid-40s, tall, confident, the kind of woman who doesn't need to raise her voice to command a room. She laughs at something a customer says, a soft, restrained laugh that makes the corner of her eyes crinkle just enough to be dangerous. And when she glances up, for a moment our eyes meet, and I swear the world narrows around that single, impossible second. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm half her age, fumbling through life like a kid with too many unanswered questions. And yet, standing here, I feel a quiet electricity that has nothing to do with the books surrounding us. It's her. The way she tilts her head when she's listening. The way her eyes seem to see everything and nothing all at once. I take a step closer to the counter, pretending to browse a shelf, my fingers trailing over the spines of old novels I'll never read. She looks up again, and our eyes lock. This time, it lasts longer, an awkward beat that makes my chest tighten. She smiles, just a twitch of her lips, polite, professional. But it isn't. There's something in the pause, something that lingers like the faint scent of rain on asphalt. "Can I help you find anything?" she asks, her voice smooth, steady. But her fingers hesitate over the next book in her hands, and I notice the micro-movement. The twitch, the almost imperceptible tremor that makes me wonder if she notices me noticing. I'm just browsing. I manage, my words clumsy. My stomach twists in ways I can't explain. There's a warmth in her presence, something electric, like a current running through the quiet of the store. And she smiles again, a little softer this time, and my mind trips over the simplicity of it. A smile shouldn't do this to me. A smile shouldn't make the air feel heavy, make me think I'm standing on the edge of something I shouldn't even try to name. She turns back to the stack of books, and for a moment, I feel the absence of her attention like a physical ache. Then she pauses and slides a copy of an old poetry collection toward me, just enough so that our fingers brush. It's accidental, I tell myself, but the warmth of her hand lingers, a subtle imprint I'll replay in my mind again and again. I leave the counter, pretending to wander aimlessly through the aisles, but every step is calculated, measured. I can still feel her eyes on me, and it's terrifying how much I want her to keep looking. I don't understand it, can't name it yet, but the quiet electricity between us is undeniable. Later, when I'm walking home and the city hums around me, I can't shake that small, impossible gesture, the brush of her fingers across mine. It wasn't a touch. It wasn't a confession. And yet, it's everything. I thought we were unbreakable. But in the space of a single, breathless second, she proved we weren't. I didn't plan to see her again so soon. The repair shop smelled like oil and old leather, a little too bright with fluorescent lights. But somehow, standing here with her leaning over a scratched desk, it felt intimate. Not the kind of intimacy you'd name. Not yet. But the kind that creeps in, unnoticed, until your chest tightens without reason. Claire's hair is pulled back today, messy strands escaping as she leans over a stack of invoices. There's a faint crease between her brows that makes her look smaller, almost vulnerable, something I've never seen before. She's usually so composed, so assured, like she's always holding a secret the world isn't ready for. Today, though, there's fatigue in her shoulders, in the way she presses her palm to her temple before sighing. "I don't know why this keeps happening," she mutters, mostly to herself. I can see her frustration ripple through her hands, the way she taps the papers in tiny, irregular beats. I want to say something, anything, but I don't. I just watch, careful not to breathe too loud. She glances up at me once, just for a second, and there's a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. It's brief, gone before I can name it, but it feels like a window opened, a crack of vulnerability I wasn't supposed to see. She's usually so guarded, polite with a touch of steel, but now, there's something softer in her posture, something that says she doesn't entirely know how to navigate the moment. I bend down to pick up a fallen invoice, and my hand brushes hers. It's accidental. I tell myself it's accidental. But the warmth lingers longer than it should, and she flinches ever so slightly, pulling back just a fraction. My stomach twists. The world narrows to her, to the gentle pull of energy she radiates even when she doesn't mean to. You've been working too hard, I say quietly, unsure why I'm speaking at all. My words feel clumsy, uneven. I hate how obvious my own attention is, but I can't stop noticing the subtle tremor in her hands, the faint shadow under her eyes, the way her shoulders slope as if they're carrying more than just the weight of papers. She gives me a small, almost imperceptible smile, tight, controlled, like she's holding herself together. I'll manage, she says. Her voice is steady, but I catch the undercurrent of something fragile, something human. It's not desperation, not quite, but it's enough to make me want to step closer, to bridge the space between us without asking permission. A brief silence falls, heavy and soft. She looks down at the papers again, shaking her head slightly, and I feel that impossible tension between us. The one that's quiet, almost polite, but charged with all the things we aren't saying. I notice the way her fingers hover over the edge of a file, the subtle way she bites her lip, and my chest tightens with a weight I don't entirely understand. Then, almost without warning, our eyes meet across the desk. She doesn't look away. She doesn't move. And for a moment, the repair shop, the invoices, the scattered tools, the buzzing fluorescent lights, vanishes. It's just us, suspended in that fragile, hesitant pause. I catch the faintest twitch of a smile, the slight softening in her gaze, and something in me stirs, quiet and relentless. I can't explain it. I don't want to. I just know that when she finally looks back at her papers, the pull between us doesn't go away. It lingers, unspoken, dangerous in its gentleness. And I can't stop thinking about it. The rain had been falling in sheets for hours, turning the city streets into streams of reflected neon. I found myself in her apartment, not entirely sure why I'd agreed to help her move a box of books from the hallway. She'd laughed when I offered, but there had been something guarded in her tone, something like a warning I couldn't quite parse. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old wood, warm and lived in. She was perched on the edge of the sofa, pulling at the cuff of her sleeve as if she could undo the tension in her shoulders that way. I stood a step too close, aware of the small space between us, aware of how her presence made the air denser, thicker, almost electric. "Do you want a hand with that?" I asked, gesturing to the box of books she hadn't touched yet. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet room. I've got it," she said, but she didn't move. Just looked at me, eyes flicking briefly to the storm outside. There was hesitation there, a softness I hadn't seen before. Something vulnerable that made me want to reach out, to cross the invisible line and close the distance between us. I swallowed, trying to keep my pulse from betraying me. Her hand brushed against mine accidentally as she reached for a book, and the small shock of contact made both of us flinch. She smiled faintly, almost embarrassed, and I had to look away for a second, pretending to arrange the books on the shelf, even though nothing mattered except that fleeting touch. "Do you ever feel like things are a little too complicated?" I asked softly, voice barely more than a whisper. It wasn't a question about books or work or the storm. It was about us, about whatever this was that we hadn't named. Her gaze dropped, tracing the edge of the coffee table. "Complicated, yeah," she murmured. Her lips pressed together, and I could see the brief flash of guilt, or was it longing, pass across her face. I wanted to say so much, to tell her she didn't have to pretend, that I saw her, really saw her. But I kept still. I had to. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, sighed, and frowned. A message from someone whose name made the air between us heavier. A friend, a past lover, some piece of her life I wasn't part of. The moment shattered, the tension broken by obligation. She answered quickly, polite but distant, and I felt the electric thread between us snap. I wanted to lean closer. I wanted to tell her that this, whatever this was, didn't have to be complicated, that I could stay, that I wanted to stay. But I didn't. I just stood there, aware of how close I was to stepping over a line, aware of the storm outside, aware of the way her hair fell across her face when she was distracted. When she finally hung up, she turned back to me, and for a heartbeat, everything felt suspended. The rain, the room, the boxes of books, all of it disappeared. Her eyes searched mine, almost silently asking the questions we didn't dare voice. I felt my hand twitch, half lifted as if I could reach for her, but I stopped. I didn't. I let the moment linger, dangerous and fragile, like a candle flickering in a dark room. And then she moved, shifting to the other side of the sofa, safe distance restored. But the tension didn't leave. It stayed, heavy, and I couldn't stop thinking about how close we'd been, how close we'd almost been. We didn't speak for the first 10 minutes after I arrived. She was at her desk, sorting receipts, her back straight but shoulders tight. I hovered near the doorway, unsure if I should make a move or just leave, but something about the silence kept me rooted. Finally, she looked up, and our eyes met. Not the casual glance of before, not the polite acknowledgement, but a look that felt like an unspoken question, heavy with meaning neither of us could yet name. "What are we doing?" she asked quietly, her voice breaking the stillness. Not a shout, not an accusation, just the raw tilt of curiosity and frustration that made my chest ache. I froze, caught off guard by the honesty, by the vulnerability in her tone. I don't know," I admitted, and the words tasted bitter in my mouth. I'd rehearsed 1,000 different ways to approach her, to talk around the tension, but not this. This blunt, necessary confrontation. She leaned back in her chair, fingers tapping softly against the wood, and for the first time, I noticed the small details. The faint line of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the way her lips pressed together when she was trying not to break, the subtle trembling of her hands as if the simple act of being here had worn her thin. "It feels like we're circling," she continued, voice softer now, almost lost. "Like we can't say what's in our heads, but we're carrying it anyway. Like we're trying not to destroy something that isn't even fully real." I swallowed, my throat tight. I wanted to reach for her, to close the distance, to erase the tension that had been building for weeks. But I couldn't. Instead, I let myself feel it. The ache, the quiet pull, the frustration of knowing she was there and still somehow unreachable. We sat like that for a while, just breathing in the silence that was louder than any words. I watched her, watched the way her fingers lingered on the edge of the desk, the tiny twitch in her shoulder, the way she avoided looking directly at me, but couldn't fully hide that she wanted to. Every small movement was a confession I wasn't allowed to hear. "I keep thinking, maybe we're just pretending," she murmured, almost to herself. "Pretending it's normal, pretending it's nothing, pretending I don't notice the way you." She stopped, shaking her head, biting her lip, as if speaking any further would make everything shatter. I didn't move. I couldn't. Her confession, incomplete as it was, struck me harder than anything else could. The tension, the longing, the things left unsaid, it all converged in the stillness of the room. She finally stood, slowly, deliberately, walking to the window and staring out at the street below. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights. I wanted to follow, to say something that might make her stay, that might make this easier, but I stayed frozen, watching her silhouette against the dim glow. And then she said it, bare, almost broken, a line I would replay over and over. "I don't know if I can keep pretending that nothing is happening, and I don't know what that makes me." The words hung in the air, heavy and trembling, and I realized in that moment that nothing would ever be the same again. She was quiet when I arrived, curled up on the small sofa with a mug of tea steaming between her hands. The apartment smelled faintly of rain and something warm, vanilla, maybe, or the lingering scent of coffee. She didn't look up at first, just traced the rim of the mug with her finger, lost in thought. "I didn't tell you about him," she said finally, her voice low, almost fragile. I didn't answer, just tilted my head, waiting. The way she said it, the hesitation, the pause. made me realize she had been holding this in longer than I had imagined. "He my ex," she continued. "He died. Suddenly. 5 years ago." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the mug down, and I noticed for the first time the tiny scars on her wrists, faint but real, reminders of a grief she'd carried silently. I don't talk about it much. I don't like remembering, but sometimes it's there anyway." I swallowed, not because I was shocked, but because I felt the weight of her confession settling around us. I didn't know what to say. There's no right response to someone laying down a piece of their soul, quiet and unadorned. "I'm sorry," I murmured, soft, unsure if it was apology, acknowledgement, or simply the only words my chest could form. She shook her head slightly, a faint smile playing on her lips, brittle but honest. "Don't be. You didn't know him. You didn't have to know him." Her eyes flicked toward me, and I caught a glimpse of something deeper, a mixture of longing, hesitation, and a sadness she didn't fully allow herself to feel. Then she stood, moving to a small shelf, and pulled out a photograph. It was black and white, slightly faded, the kind that carries the weight of memory. She held it carefully, like it could shatter if touched too hard. "This is him," she said quietly. "It's silly, but sometimes I forget how much I miss him. I thought I'd moved on. But some mornings, it hits again, like a wave I didn't see coming." I looked at the photo, at the smile that mirrored none of the grief she carried. And then, without thinking, I reached for her hand, just a fraction, letting her feel the warmth of someone still here. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Her fingers pressed lightly against mine, hesitant, unsure, but present. I can't imagine what that feels like," I said honestly, my voice breaking the silence that had grown too heavy. "But I'm here, if you ever need someone to just," my words faltered. I wasn't offering to replace him, couldn't. But I wanted to be the quiet presence she might lean on. She smiled, a flicker this time, more real. I know," she whispered. Then she looked down at our hands, as if surprised they were even touching. And I felt something shift. Not a confession, not a decision, just a quiet, seismic tremor in the foundation of how we existed together. For the first time, I saw her fully, not just the confident, composed woman who had kept me at arm's length, but the fractured, human Claire, carrying a history that weighed on her, soft and jagged and unshielded. And in that moment, as our fingers lingered together, the rain tapping on the window, I realized that whatever this was between us, it was no longer just tension or curiosity. It had become something fragile, unspoken, and entirely unavoidable. She pulled her hand back slightly, her eyes not leaving mine, and whispered, almost to herself, "I didn't expect you to understand. But somehow you do." The apartment smelled faintly of rain and old books when I arrived that evening. She was sitting on the sofa, knees pulled to her chest, staring at a half-empty mug of tea as if it contained all the answers she needed. I didn't know how to start, so I didn't. I just stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. She looked up then, and for the first time, there wasn't hesitation or guardedness in her eyes. Just clarity. And it hit me. The truth we had been circling for weeks, months, quietly, was finally palpable between us. Not said aloud, not spelled out, but present in the air, in the way her shoulders had finally relaxed, in the way her gaze found mine and held without apology. I sat beside her, careful, leaving a small space. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. The tension that had built, the questions, the hesitations, they had all dissolved into something quieter, something deeper, something that didn't demand words. She shifted slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I noticed the small movement, and without thinking, I reached out, letting my fingers hover over hers until they brushed lightly. A soft, deliberate contact. She didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her hand to meet mine, and just like that, a slow current passed between us, gentle, inevitable, human. "It's different now," she murmured, voice barely audible. Not a confession, not a declaration, just an acknowledgement. I nodded because I felt it too. Different. Not perfect, not easy, not even entirely safe, but undeniable. We sat like that, hands brushing, eyes occasionally meeting, sometimes looking away, sometimes tracing the patterns of the worn carpet beneath us. There was no rush, no grand gesture, no need for dramatic words. It was enough to share the space, to share the quiet, to let the connection exist without forcing it into labels or expectations. She leaned slightly, forehead brushing mine for the briefest moment, a soft grounding touch. My chest tightened, not in panic, not in longing, but in recognition. This was ours. A mutual understanding, carefully earned through hesitations, silences, and small, tremulous confessions. Outside, the rain had slowed, leaving the city slick and quiet. Inside, nothing had changed except the tension had lifted, replaced by a fragile, steady presence that neither of us could deny. Finally, she pulled back just enough to meet my eyes fully. "We'll figure it out," she said softly. Not a promise, not a plea, just a simple acknowledgement. I nodded again. No words could add anything to what we were feeling. We didn't need them. And there, sitting side by side, hands brushing, breathing in the same air, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to say before. It wasn't about rushing or fixing or even naming it. It was about being present, here, now, together. The small, quiet moments were enough. And for the first time, I knew we wouldn't be pretending anymore. We just sat there. It's strange, looking back now. Sitting in the same bookstore where it all began, I catch glimpses of us in every corner. The way her fingers brushed a book, the soft laugh she didn't even realize I'd memorized, the quiet electricity of moments that never made it into words. I've changed. I notice things now. The subtle tremor in someone's hand when they're holding back, the pause before a confession, the weight of silence that can speak louder than a shout. I carry patience differently, more carefully, because some things, some people, are worth the stillness. And I think she's changed too, though maybe she wouldn't say so. I see it in the small ways, the way she lets her guard down, even just for a second, the way she allows herself to lean on someone without fear of judgment. There's still strength, still confidence, but tempered now with trust, with the understanding that closeness doesn't have to be dangerous. We learn together, I think, that love isn't always fireworks or declarations. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's shared space, soft touches, the patience to let something grow without forcing it into words. And sometimes it's simply knowing that someone sees you, really sees you, and stays anyway. I can't say that everything is perfect. Life isn't perfect, but it feels real, grounded, human, and that's enough. Sometimes I catch myself smiling at nothing, replaying the small, impossible moments, a brush of fingers, a shared glance, a quiet pause that spoke louder than anything else could. They're ours. Moments that built a bridge from hesitation to understanding, from tension to trust, from unspoken longing to a quiet, earned closeness. And when I leave the bookstore, walking past the rainy streets, I realize that the story isn't just hers or mine. It's ours. Something fragile, something careful, but something that belongs fully to the space between us. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this? Because for me, even now, long after the rain has stopped, long after the books have been shelved, I can still feel it. That quiet pull of presence, that soft, inevitable gravity that makes you realize some connections aren't meant to be rushed. They're meant to be lived, slowly, tenderly, unbreakable in ways that matter most. And maybe that's what we learned, that some bonds don't need declarations. They just need attention, patience, a quiet willingness to see someone fully and stay anyway.